in today's video, I really just want to introduce why I think these three resources were so helpful to me. I'm just going to talk through them, free resources that are available on the internet. Two of them are very myasthenia focused, the first one being an article and the second one being a book. And then the third resource I want to talk about is Peat. So Peat's written a number of books and a number of articles and continues to write newsletters. So that's why I've listed there, as you can see on that side, article, book, Peat, and then we can do a bit of a discussion at the end. So for me, these were the most valuable resources, and I wanted to set this whole live stream up over the last few months, really to be able to do this, to be able to interact with my desktop, to be able to show the articles that I read online. So introduction to where I got these from. I think naturally when people got diagnosed, the first thing that you do is search for information. Traditionally, probably would have searched for information in a library, in books. Unfortunately, these days we can look for a lot of that information online. So naturally, I looked for information online, and a lot of people are sharing on the groups. You're seeing information, about the disease, the different symptoms that happen, but it doesn't really go further than that. And that's where I started looking for more information. So it's a bit of a touchy subject. Sometimes it can be offensive toward people if they think that the information is not credible or something. This is stuff that's helped me personally, and I want to just share that because I know that if I came across this information, if I was diagnosed now, I would want to come across this information again. And if I came across it a bit earlier and was able to piece it together a bit earlier, I think I could have made fewer mistakes in my recovery. Just to reiterate, I'm not in perfect health. I'm still making my sort of comeback from myasthenia and Graves. My myasthenia is in remission at the moment. I don't have any symptoms and I've been pretty stable for a long time off medication. For thyroid, I'm not on any medication either, but I think I was incorrectly treated for thyroid, and as a result I think I have a lot of symptoms of underactive thyroid at the moment, which I'm still trying to get right and fix my metabolism from that. So my life is not amazing always, but I think this information has helped me to get to a place that's probably better than most people that have been diagnosed with myasthenia. So pretty much going to get straight into it. The first thing I want to share, I'm just going to change to my desktop, so I might have to adjust the microphone again. So once I change screens, if the microphone's not up, if you just let me know straight away, please, guys. Let's cut to that. Just if you aren't subscribed, I think the guys that are all tuned in now, but if you watch this in the repeat, if you are looking for a bit of a different take on myasthenia, if you're interested in my journey, what I found valuable, and then going forward, what the little things that I do, I think that add up to recovery and to health, you can subscribe to my channel. You can look for @MGAthlete on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube if you want to look for some of my other videos. I've tried to do a bit more of a detailed video about my diagnosis and my remission to explain to people that it wasn't overnight that I recovered. It was 4 years of learning that sort of got me to this point. So I do think it's possible for more people to recover, but at the same time, it's not just a magic pill. It's been a long journey for me. As I can relate to most people with myasthenia, it's very difficult at times, and fortunately for me, it's getting better and better as I move forward, and that's why I want to share some of the information that I think is really useful. So I think I've still got the microphone up, so you can just give me a thumbs up in the chat there. I'm going to go across, check one more slide and see if that is good. So I think my microphone's still good. You guys can just keep me on track with that. Cool. So the first thing I want to talk about here, I don't want to get myself in trouble in terms of copyright and things like that. But the first thing I said I wanted to talk about is an article, and as you can see there on the screen, titled Myasthenia Gravis, a Holistic Therapy by Walter Last. So this is an article that I've read. I mean, if you look on my Google tab, it'll say it's opened many times. It's one of the first articles that I came across, and it's one that I continue to read to this day. Not that, because it's too complicated. It's actually quite a good summary, but it's one that I think every time I reread, the more I understand, the more I can get out of it. So really, the big things I want to talk about with this article is it was the first thing that sort of showed me or opened me up to the idea that nutrition and nutrients in particular were involved in myasthenia gravis or in disease. So if you read through this article, the beginning firstly talks about myasthenia in general, talks about the symptoms, talks about acetylcholine, and the traditional that we understand that the nerve receptors aren't working. And then after that, it talks a little bit about the causes of myasthenia gravis. So basically, once again, still pretty standard, acetylcholine receptors are getting blocked. But then starts to bring up things saying that there's not an understanding of actually why these things are happening. And that's one thing I think everyone gets a bit disheartened with when you go to the doctor. You don't really, there's no obviously understanding of why does myasthenia happen. I don't have an answer for it because there is no answer currently. And that's where it sort of ends for everyone. They think, okay, well, there's no definite like scientific answer of why we're getting myasthenia gravis, so therefore there's no hope. For me, it was a little bit different. I realized that, there's no scientific answer, but it doesn't mean that you cannot try things that might improve for you. So this article is actually based on the second resource that I'm going to talk about, which is a book. And in that book, they quote certain things, and it's guys' research and writing from 1950. So this is not new information. It's some of the oldest information that I could find about myasthenia gravis, and ironically proved to be some of the most useful information for me. So under causes of myasthenia gravis, interestingly, came up there's crop sprays. And it sounds a bit like a tinfoil hat thing, but it has sort of just opened me to the idea. I'm living in Stellenbosch. I'm living in, if you're not familiar with Stellenbosch, South Africa, a winelands country, quite heavy in terms of agriculture and obviously vineyards, and a lot of crop spray going on in Stellenbosch. But it doesn't really answer the question for me, why did I get myasthenia and somebody else that's lived or grown up in Stellenbosch and lived here since forever. So it was, although it's interesting, it wasn't providing me with much information there. The section that I really enjoyed is the next section of this article, where they start talking about nutritional factors. And basically there they go through the different B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, B5, 6, 9, 12. And they sort of explain what each B vitamin does in the body, and in particular in what relation that has to myasthenia gravis. So the key nutrients that they speak about there being vitamin B1, its interaction with manganese, and then why that would influence myasthenia gravis, and in particular lactic acid, lack of muscle contraction. And there's little snippets in here which I think are coming from the book, but they talk about animal experiments. Now, animal experiments are not obviously always relevant, but it's sometimes the closest thing that we can look for possible answers in relation to humans. So they talk about monkeys. They could induce myasthenia gravis in monkeys by making them deficient in B1, B6, and pantothenic acid, or B5. So I wasn't too worried about, which particular vitamins. In the beginning, I was, focused on, okay, cool, I need this nutrient, this vitamin, maybe I can buy them, and then all of a sudden I'm going to be fine. As I've matured, it's been less and less towards, trying to pick up one specific vitamin and more trying to get a holistic view on health. But just the fact that they have got these short snippets of saying they could induce this by, holding back certain nutrients, sort of showed me that maybe it's nutrients that I'm missing from my diet or being blocked, whether it's unique to me or not, but maybe that is involved somehow with myasthenia gravis. And once again, I wasn't looking for definite proof. I was just like, if I can try something and it maybe is gonna help, I'm willing to try that. At this time, I was taking my medication. I was working with a doctor. This is something on the side. I thought, I can work on my health. I can work on the food and the things I'm eating. And this was where I sort of started with this article. After that, they also spoke about myasthenia being a very common after, I think it was World War II, they said. A lot of the prisoners, they said in Singapore, were malnourished, and they had myasthenia or myasthenia gravis symptoms. They were able to restore their health by giving them a highly nutritious diet, which was rich in liver. So once again, that sort of showed me, liver very high in B vitamins and vitamin A or retinol in particular. So maybe there's something to that. Liver not really well consumed or commonly consumed in the diet today. I had never really personally eaten liver in my life. I wasn't really into pate. So it just made me think, okay, once again, maybe there's something to what am I not eating, or is my nutrition not well-rounded enough that I'm missing certain things in my life. So this, once again, just sort of kept me thinking, maybe there's more to these nutrients. At this stage, I didn't really know much about even the names of the B vitamins. So this was the real beginning for me. After that, they talk about vitamin C, vitamin E, which are commonly just called antioxidants, but they're fat-soluble, water-soluble vitamins. And then they talk about manganese. And in this, they also talk about manganese and the thymus gland. So you can see there the one section, once again, I think derived from the book that I'll talk about after this. But manganese and the thymus gland is very interesting for me because commonly in myasthenia gravis, you're seeing some defect with the thymus gland, and that's why often people are having a thymectomy or removing the thymus gland in myasthenia gravis. In this article and in the book, they're not exactly sure what the relationship is with myasthenia and the thymus. They know there's some relation, and they know that in X percentage, whether it's 30, 50, or 60% of the time, if they remove the thymus gland, people can take less medication and seem to function better after that. So for me, it was still a risk. I didn't want to have my thymus gland removed, as I've said before. I'm not going to get into that now. But based off this was one of the first things that I read that said a thymoma, which is a growth on your thymus gland, or an enlarged thymus gland, which they call hyperplasia, can be caused by deficiency in manganese. So that was something for me. I thought, okay, maybe I haven't got manganese in my diet, maybe there's something wrong with what I'm eating, and am I missing certain nutrients once again that has caused me to get myasthenia gravis. So yeah, then they reference the book, which I'll get to next, the title, Thymus, Manganese, and Myasthenia Gravis. There are some copies available still on Amazon, but the one I use, I think there's an online PDF copy that is available as well. And then this, obviously the author I mentioned was Walter Last, so you can, back to the top, you can see Walter Last. Then he gives his ideas of what he thinks is a good approach to myasthenia. So you can have a look at that. I didn't exactly follow what Walter Last thought. He does speak about unsaturated fats and vitamin E, which I'll talk a bit more maybe about when we get to the book or when we talk about Peat. The unsaturated fats or polyunsaturated fats come up a lot. He does bring in some just general health things which, yeah, you might think are so generic, will they even help you? But for me, this was the start. So the start was, as he mentions, he talks about a diet, avoid certain things. So it's pretty stock standard, avoiding processed foods. But the big things I want to talk about, he says, avoiding soy, corn, and those genetically modified foods. not just about that, but it's those oils and those oils which are found in animal products that I really avoided. So coming off this, I went for a lot of meat, vegetable, um, saturated fats being coconut oil and butter, avoiding all unsaturated fats, except for probably made the mistake of using fish oil, which is highly unsaturated and unstable. So probably a mistake on that. And then little things that they mention in there, which I don't know if they carry as much weight, but they might do. Changing your home in terms of what products you're using in terms of deodorants, creams, aerosol sprays, air fresheners, molds, toxins. So I don't know what how much weight those all carry together, but if it's 5% at most, I'm not sure. I did change all of those things in my life in the beginning. To change, even toothpastes, I went fluoride free. Avoided colorants, all of the stuff that he's really said there. Some stuff I have changed my opinion on now. I mean, he says they obviously avoid gluten and grains and things like that. That's most of the stuff that I dropped off as well, not necessarily just from this article, but because I sort of looked at many different things together. He does give recommendations for supplements and things like that. I'm not going to comment too much on that. I would say, knowing what I know now, I would have been probably more cautious on the supplements that I took. I have mentioned before that supplements are a bit of a problem because there's not much regulation in them, and a B complex is not a B complex. There's no real idea of what amount of each B vitamin one person would need and how much I would need versus how much someone else would need could be completely different, and which B vitamins I might be missing versus someone else, even two people with myasthenia, might be completely different. So it's very difficult to know what is a good B supplement or something like that to take. So the thing I focused on, and I think it's easier to make less mistakes on, is to focus on sourcing your nutrition from food, and from some of the easiest to digest food, and then over and above that you can look for certain supplements, but you got to be careful. Quality, for example, vitamin E is a big one. I think it's really important for myasthenia gravis because it combats the unsaturated fats, but most vitamin E's are made from soy oil or wheat germ oil or sunflower oil, for example. So those are all unsaturated fats in themselves, so often don't even have enough vitamin E to stop that substance that it's made from oxidizing. So there's no chance that is going to help you or give you a net vitamin E. So it can actually cause more damage than helping you. So yeah, that's pretty much the article. Let's cut back to this. So I know you guys are all still there. If you can still hear me, Toby, I don't know if you're connected. If you have any questions, read the article or anything at any stage, more than welcome to jump in and ask. I know, like I said at the beginning, these first two are really pretty much based, like I said, the article based off the book, and then the pretty much myasthenia based, and then at the end talk a bit more general health in the direction that I sort of went to once I got more and more confident, more and more stable in the myasthenia department, let's say. So I'm not sure if my chat is loading. If anyone is still there, just give me a shout. Cool. So that was the article. Now I'm going to move on to the second resource that I want to talk about, and this is the book. For me, this is some good anecdotal evidence of certain myasthenia cases, along with a more in-depth discussion about the thymus, a lot more of these animal studies or tests that they spoke about, the interaction with the thymus gland, manganese, and myasthenia gravis. So this is a book that's available online in the States. I have linked these in the description. So if you're in the description box, you can see a link to the article, then you can see a link to this online book, and then there's a link to Ray Peat's website as well. So this book is, I think it's two things put together. So the title being The Thymus, Myasthenia Gravis, and Manganese. And that's incorporating my understanding, that's incorporating Emmanuel Josephson's book, which is called Myasthenia Gravis, Manganese, and the Thymus. As I said, there's some known interaction of these two, but not exactly sure what the relationship is between the thymus gland and myasthenia gravis. So this book is, some people have said, pretty hard to understand, and some say it's been written sort of like a monologue. I've quite enjoyed reading through it, and I'd recommend if you do read through it and you don't really understand it, to reread through it and try and pick up other pieces of information that can help you understand certain parts. This was truly valuable for me. Once again, just showing that it is possible, that there were certain, I think they did 5 case studies in this book, and people were able to recover or improve on this nutritional therapy. So that really just gave me a lot of hope that it is possible to improve your symptoms, and you can take care of your nutrition yourself, and then you'll be able, or I was able to see some of similar results off the back of that as well. I'm just going to read a question by Toby. I said, the book talks about the relation with the thymoma and hyperplasia. What about in people who do not have changes in their thymus but still have NG symptoms? So, as I said, the relationship is not clearly understood. Some people have, a normal thymus gland after they've had a scan. Some people have an enlarged, and some people have a growth. I'm not claiming to understand. I know what's going on because the doctors don't really know what's going on. But they know that there's some relationship. In the book, they talk about the thymus gland sort of swelling or expanding like the thyroid does when you have thyroid issues. And they said, or they noticed, after manganese supplementation, that thymus gland returned to normal, and that autoimmune reaction stopped, and it was back to normal size. So people, I think it's quoted in the article and the book that they talk about hyperplasia and thymomas literally melting away. So that was encouraging for me. I took it upon myself to look into that. I did do some manganese supplementation. Recommend that if you can work with somebody who can test your mineral levels, find out if you are manganese deficient. I assumed that I was manganese deficient because I had the thymoma, and from that I used some of those supplements for a period of time until I had no more symptoms and no more thymoma. So my story, if you're not familiar, I had a thymoma when I was diagnosed, and then I had that rescanned. I think it was about 2 years after that, and then the following year after that. So 2 years and 3 years after diagnosis. The second scan came back still with enlargement, but it was smaller than the original scan. And then they said it was hyperplasia and not thymoma anymore. And then, well, they said they might have been wrong the first time. Doesn't really faze me. And then the last scan, they said it was back to normal, no issues. So they were quite surprised. They didn't ask me, any further questions. They didn't say anything after that. So, yeah, it was good enough for me. It's not for me to try and prove anything. I'm obviously just trying to improve my health. So then in the book, there's a few things that I do want to bring up. Very similar to very similar to the vitamin B. Let's exit that. Very similar to the vitamin B explained in the article. They'll go through the importance of, for example, B1 in lactic acid production if you have a deficiency of, why is that not up? Okay. B1 in lactic acid production, so deficiency of B1, for example, could cause people to have a problem converting glucose straight into lactic acid. But not as simple as just taking one B vitamin and then sort out your problems. There's a relationship between manganese and B1, and I think it's quite a fine line. They talk about the details in the book, and it's something that, yeah, I sort of trial and error, and I think if I can say what worked for me was to really not try and take everything all at the same time. In the beginning, it's quite difficult. Obviously, you just want to improve, and you think, I read this, I must just take a B vitamin supplement and then I'm going to be good. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to take this. It's very difficult to know what is working and what isn't working. If you see a slight improvement, but you're still not perfect, and you took 7 different supplements, how could you possibly know which was good, which was bad? So I think, looking back now, I'd probably take far less supplements than I did take, try to fix my food, try to keep learning about diet. And then if you're still having issues, if I was still having issues after that, then, try what I did, sort of manganese, vitamin E, and then certain B vitamins. I've just selected 1 or 2 pages out of the book just to talk about in particular. And this is where I really want to talk about polyunsaturated fats. The book and the article both speak about people really improved on their diets, but then they sort of stalled, and it wasn't until vitamin E was added to the nutritional profile that people improved. So they speak about it here. Ray speaks about it. The problem, what vitamin E does, is just known as an antioxidant, but does a lot more than that. It prevents fats and fat-soluble vitamins from oxidizing. So in the paragraph at the bottom here, you can see that oxidation of fats and fat-soluble vitamins, especially vitamin A, is prevented by vitamin E. So for me, as I mentioned in the article, vitamin A was crucial to those prisoners that were malnourished. They were given liver, and I said that liver was high in vitamin A and in B vitamins. And this sort of adds on to that, saying that, vitamin E will protect vitamin A from oxidizing. But the problem is, what is raising the requirement for vitamin E, or why is vitamin E deficient? And I think this is the crux of a lot of health issues, in my opinion, a lot of my own personal health issues, is based off the high amount of unsaturated fats in the modern diet. So I do have another thing I just want to show. This is a graph. You can look for other graphs. There's a few out there, different references. So if this one is not official enough, you can look for another graph. But if you sort of look for the difference between how much vegetable oil or polyunsaturated or unsaturated oil that was consumed in the early 1900s to how much unsaturated fat is consumed in the diet in 2000 or 2010, it is a striking difference. So this purple graph that's going up here, if you can follow my cursor, that's vegetable oils. The rest of them don't change too much. You can see butter in yellow seems to decrease. Lard or animal fat seems to decrease a lot. And margarine starts low, comes up, but then everyone figured out trans fats and certain things are bad. And then that decreased quite a lot. So it's quite interesting, and I even made the mistake myself that we knew, or we read, that margarine and those fats are terrible, which are made from vegetable oils, but we didn't know that vegetable oils were bad. So we stopped consuming margarines, but we carry on frying with sunflower, canola, cottonseed, these unsaturated unsaturated fats. And that's the thing that I wanted to point out from that vitamin E is lowered in the presence of all these extra polyunsaturated fats. And my understanding is there's no nutritional value for these vegetable oils. They're not adding anything. It's not like you're getting any nutrients from that. And they are majorly, my understanding, inhibiting oxidation of glucose, lowering your vitamin E content. You can read about in the book how you're going to struggle with vitamin E. They clearly lay out why having no vitamin E is a problem in myasthenia gravis. I can give anecdotal, stories of my improvement, and then when I took vitamin E, a decent one, and I was, rid of my symptoms. It doesn't really matter. It's more if you can read the information, understand it to the best of your ability, and be able to try something with the help of, a practitioner or a nutritionist or something, figure out what you're deficient in, and then move forward. The thing why I think it is such a long process is, and Ray talks about this as well, these polyunsaturated fats are so unstable that the body doesn't want to oxidize them. It rather just holds onto them and will preferentially oxidize saturated fat. So it's very difficult to rid your body of these polyunsaturated fats very quickly. I watched a separate video last week where they stated that the half-life of these oils in your body is 680 days. And that's a very similar amount to what Ray is talking about, saying it will take about 4 years of eating a polyunsaturated free diet to remove or to really lower the polyunsaturated tissue content of percentage in your fat cells. So that's why I think it takes so long for people to recover. I understand that people think it might not be possible. For me, it took 4 years. I'm not finished yet. Like I said, I'm still working on some thyroid issues. As I mentioned, I took fish oil supplements for a long time, which I wish I didn't do. And that's also highly unstable polyunsaturated fat. That's probably oxidized before I even open the bottle. So there obviously are mistakes that I have made that if I look back now, I would do better. But sitting where I'm sitting now, coming from probably the same place as anybody watching this, I've no training in nutrition, no training as a doctor, or no training in health, limited understanding of biology. But if I'm able to read these articles and make sense of it, and to be able to improve my diet at home and my understanding of what's working for me and what's not, I really get encouraged and think that more people have the power to change their life or change their circumstances by changing what's on their plate. And just to add into that, it's not about, not all diets are the same. It's not like I'm saying there's one specific diet for everybody, but because somebody ate well, which is very broadly defined, it's not necessary that you're doing everything right. Even if you're doing a lot of things right, like I can still be taking a supplement or eating a food or a food group that I'm misunderstandingly or read information that presents it as, a quality source of food, but might be incorrect. And that's going to happen. So that's why for me it's about continually refining what I'm learning and never feeling like I've arrived and I understand everything. It's more trying to keep on learning and keep improving my health. So these books and articles are just a start for me. I do understand that not everybody has an interest in health and nutrition, and some people, just want to get told, eat this, or if I eat this, then I'm going to be fine. If that is you, then I recommend even just reading the article. For me, there's certain things that you can apply if you want to trust Walter Last, if you want to trust Emmanuel Josephson, or if you want to trust Ray. I obviously am trusting certain people as well. Most of these things I try and pick out what I think is working and what sort of overlaps and is the best. But ultimately, if you don't have the time, or or it's not of your in your interest to over research, then you've got to pick something and see if that works for you and try for a period of time. I understand it's quite difficult, especially when you're ill, to try something for a long period of time, but you have to be patient. So for me, I didn't eat well for even a year and then suddenly I was fine. I've got videos of 9 months into eating well. I still had terrible symptoms. I still, my eye was shut when I did a speech. It's not a quick fix. So the point of me doing these videos is to show that it isn't that quick. It's a long-term thing, but it's like you can keep learning. And I'm not presenting myself as an expert that knows everything. I'm more trying to present that myself as a layman, if I can show information that I think was useful for me, that's the only reason why this information was published is because it was useful for somebody in the past. That gave me confidence to do my own recovery, and that's what I think can hopefully help other people. I just want to check if there was anything else. So this book is really long. So it's like I mentioned, they talk more detail of the thymus, what's the functions of the thymus. They talk about the relationship with that and myasthenia. The one thing that I took from it, and it's not a recommendation, it was just personally for me, was they saw that people that had a thymectomy or their thymus gland removed struggled to recover with nutritional therapy. They didn't say it was impossible. They still said that they had hope for those people that had removed all of their thymus tissue. They struggled to recover with these manganese and vitamin E and different therapies. They also speculated on why there were varying results with thymectomy. And I think all we can do is speculate. There's certain studies, as I've mentioned, a lot of people like to quote the studies and say thymectomy is guaranteed improvement. If you unpack that study, the study is saying that people took less prednisone after having a thymectomy. So there's two groups of people. It's 120 people, I think, in total, or it's 120 in each group. So it's either 120 or 240 people. Half of them had thymectomy, and they had a lower prednisone level than the other half. Nothing about full recovery, nothing about remission. So I didn't really take much from that. I was looking for more of a recovery than that. And in this book and in the article, they spoke about people struggle to have a full-term recovery without their thymus gland. The speculation that they mentioned was that if some people had the operation and certain pockets of thymus tissue was left behind, maybe there was sufficient thymus left behind to help that person process manganese. So my understanding was that you had enough thymus taken out to stop the majority of that autoimmune reaction, so people had less symptoms possibly, and then there was enough thymus still left behind to process manganese. Depending on who you ask, most of the doctors will say the thymus gland is important as a kid for the development of your immune system, but after that it has no function. For me, listening to Ray's articles and Ray talking about it and reading this book, I personally don't think that the thymus gland doesn't have any importance as an adult, so that's why for me personally, I decided to keep my thymus gland. And as I mentioned, my thymus gland is back to normal size now. My antibodies might still be higher than a normal person. I did have them retested a year or two ago, but symptom-free for 2.5 years. So I haven't had that rescanned, and I doubt I will. So my thymus gland is back to normal just from following certain nutritional principles that were written about in the book. So you can read in this. I thought it was quite encouraging. 5 different case studies. Case studies or anecdotal evidence doesn't prove anything once again, but they sort of talk you through what they did with each person. And for me, that's quite encouraging because it's already done, so it's a report on somebody. It's not like they're testing it on somebody now, so you don't have to think, oh, they're ruining someone's life. This is a report of what's already happened, so you can see how it affected people then. and that encouraged me to sort of feel like, yeah, it is possible. If somebody else recovered, then it's possible for me to recover, and push on from that. So the one thing I'd just reiterate, that not all vitamin E's are created equal. If you do read the book, and you're suddenly very keen to supplement certain things, I would chat to somebody who can test your mineral levels, hair mineral analysis or something like that for manganese, because manganese needs to balance with copper, zinc, and iron especially. So I do have, and I was actually curious if Ray had some ideas on it, that maybe excess iron from fortification of grains, which I think happens in the States and also happens in South Africa, if that could be a problem. So all of your breads and certain foods have added iron to that, and I wonder if too much iron, along with having iron from that, plus iron from red meat, plus iron from vegetables, and in a lot of multivitamins as well, if that could be influencing or blocking manganese absorption along with other things, that could possibly lead to manganese deficiency and then into myasthenia. So linked back to Toby's question, there's some, even if you read the book, there's some correlation or relationship between the thymus gland, manganese, and myasthenia. And for me it was about experimenting and trying to figure it out. It's not, there's not like, I think people are thinking there's 10-step guide to do this and then you're going to recover from myasthenia. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you see it, it's not that simple. You need to figure out, and if it was that simple, there would be a cure. We already know that there's no cure or no known cure for myasthenia gravis. So I don't think you can realistically think that it's going to, you're going to eat well for 3 months and then all of a sudden you're going to be fine. Because if that was the solution, then we would know that already. So it's got to be, the mere fact that we don't know how to cure myasthenia means inherently that it's quite complicated. So for me, that's what I'm trying to say. You have to try things. I tried things based on this book. We have the fortunate things of today that we can do certain tests. You can realize, I've been eating a lot of these foods in my diet. There's information on what's in those foods. And then you can work with a healthcare practitioner and try and figure out, why did you fall into these traps? Was I eating all this processed food? Was I eating, I think especially in the westernized world, so it's America, probably more so than South Africa, but including South Africa and obviously including myself, eating a lot of, takeaways or fast foods, a lot of deep fried, whether it's chips or pastries or pies. Most processed foods are carrying vegetable oil, and a lot of that unsaturated fat, like I said, is just inhibiting metabolism, wasting your vitamin E, and that over a period of time, I think, was the reason for me why I got into trouble. So you see, Justin's got a question here. What would be the factors you look for when deciding on credible articles and what you're going to follow? Obviously, since you have started, you have changed it up a lot. So that's the whole thing, and that's why I'm just going to cut back to So Justin's question, that's why I want to present this information, because I think a bit misunderstood. Some people think that I'm presenting a formula and saying A, B, C, X amount of time, cure myasthenia, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm trying to say, these are articles and books and information online that I read through that I think are useful. If somebody has something that's counter, that's how we learn. So if somebody says, I'll follow a different approach, I spend a lot of time reading and looking at articles and videos that are counter to what I think or what I'm doing. And that's because I want to learn. So it's not about getting stuck in an echo chamber of, this is what I believe to be right, so I only watch all the stuff on what I believe to be right. But what factors do I personally look at, Justin? I like now, and I'll mention more at the end, is looking at it holistically, and not about, just about curing myasthenia or just about recovering from thyroid issues. It's more like, how does that fit together as a whole package? So that's what I've really enjoyed about Ray Peat. He's got a philosophy that it's so much bigger than just eating certain foods. It's all about, stress, mitochondrial energy, and the organism as a whole. So it's not about, eat certain foods when you have this illness, and you eat certain foods when you have this illness, and you detox this when you're doing this. It's more like these are the list of things that are not stressful, and try and incorporate this sort of stuff in your lifestyle. But that is ultimately the question, Justin. How do you know if something's credible or not? That's it. I mean, anyone can present a study on anything. You can get points for and against. And I could be wrong with what I'm doing. I think there is value in people trying things and sharing their experience, but also to understand that it's not a proof. I'm the first one to say, if I recover, it's not a proof. It doesn't prove anything. If one person does it, it doesn't prove. If 10 people does it, it doesn't prove anything. If 100 people recover, it doesn't prove anything. But then, if that number of people improve, then people can start to, find common information in what those people did, and then start to draw inferences or correlations, and then possibly be able to do studies and figure out, why did that happen. So in terms of how do you actually know what's credible, that's for you to decide. So it's very difficult, and I think I don't think it should. I'm sometimes scared to share the information that I have, because I could be wrong. But that's why I sort of got to a place where I know I'm not recommending anything. I'm just sort of saying what I do or what I did that I think is useful, and then just pass that over to somebody else, so they can look for it themselves. If anyone does have any other questions, you can load them up in the chat as well. So I think everyone that's watching is probably subscribed to my channel already. But if you're not, you're watching this later. If you are interested in the sort of content that I am presenting here, just information that I found useful in the recovery of myasthenia gravis, you can check out my channel, MG Athlete. Subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell notification icon, then you'll know when I go live in future, and you can join in for some of these chats, ask some questions and some follow-ups. I'm just going to reach for a sip of water, so if you guys just give me a sec. Cool, thanks guys. So the last thing I want to move on to, let me cut across to that. The last thing I want to get on to is Ray Peat. So Ray Peat is actually, I know there'll probably be a lot of comments here. This is what everyone's been exposed to in my life. If you've been following me lately, you'll see that Ray's been more of an influence, especially in the last year or so for me. And quite interestingly, I did mention in one of my earlier videos when I first came across Ray. Now, if you don't like agreeing or stuff that disagrees with you, Ray Peat is going to be a very difficult one to entertain in the beginning. For me, when I first came across Ray, it was actually when I had a blood clot. So that was about a year before I got diagnosed with myasthenia. I had a blood clot in my leg. The doctor sort of said there was no reason for me to have that. I had blood thinners for 10 days, and then I carried on. And then, like I said, a year later, I was diagnosed with or a bit more than a year later, I was diagnosed with myasthenia gravis. So that was quite interesting. And the way I came across Ray, as I was talking about, was that Ray was the only information I found on the internet that was counter, at that time that I could find, that was counter to having more omega-3 supplement or food in your diet. And I think that sort of shows the what I was looking for. I think, as I mentioned, a lot of people, when looking for information, you're trying to find information that agrees with what you're doing. It's natural to some extent, you don't want to be wrong, but I think when stuff isn't working, for me, I'm trying to find what am I doing that's wrong. So at that stage, I had taken some omega-3 supplement before getting this clot, and everything said, you know, even once I had the clot, if I looked online, one of the things that came up said, take more omega-3. Omega-3 will thin your blood, will stop you from getting, you know, a stroke, heart disease, all of that. Omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. Omega-3 is the best. You know, if you've had issues with blood clotting and whatever, omega-3 is for you. And Ray's article that I came across was the first article that sort of said, yeah, omega-3 is causing the problem. So I came across that by looking for, you know, what are the negatives of this omega-3, or can omega-3 affect blood clotting and cause, you know, problems with clotting? So that was my introduction to Ray. After that, you know, blood clot went away, and then the next year I got diagnosed with myasthenia. I didn't read about Ray. I didn't, you know, Ray doesn't have much on myasthenia. There's one little thing which I will show up. So yeah, Ray stuff came up. I'll just show you about the blood clots information quickly. So let's cut to this. Cool. So this is the third thing I want to talk about, number 3. This is Ray Peat's website. What is quite cool is Ray's 85, I think, at the moment. And I emailed Ray and said, can I talk about some of your articles online? Can I show them on video? And just the humble person that he is, and he wants to keep learning, said, yeah, with pleasure. You know, I'd love to hear what you did and, you know, how you were able to improve. So for me, that was amazing to hear that from Ray. But I think one of his articles is called The Great Fish Oil Experiment. I've probably missed it, so... Yeah. So this is the article, The Great Fish Oil Experiment. Let's see if there's anything with blood clotting. Oh, there's nothing with blood clotting. So there's platelets. Yeah, well, I'm not sure the wording on that, but if you read through Ray's stuff, he was, like I mentioned, the first one to say omega-3s are highly unsaturated, oxidize, and they can actually cause clotting deficiencies. So that was my introduction to Ray. Like I mentioned, get diagnosed with myasthenia. Didn't really, you know, read much more about Ray, and it was only last year I've been having thyroid issues. Obviously, I was diagnosed with Graves at the same time, Graves' disease at the same time, or just after Myasthenia Gravis. And I've been on thyroid suppressive medicine pretty much on and off, on most of the time, and then obviously doctors try to get me off a bit, and then back on because my numbers weren't great. And then once again, Ray was some of the stuff that I found that was counter to what the norm was saying. So most people, Graves' disease is diagnosed with TSH. So if a certain level of your thyroid stimulating hormone, if it's not registering or it's 0 or below a certain low number, then that's how you'll be diagnosed with Graves. Ray turned around and said, and based off older information once again from 1950 or before, that's not how they used to diagnose Graves. The TSH can actually be suppressed because of stress hormones like cortisol, and the reason is because you don't have enough energy and you actually have underactive thyroid, but it's being revved up by these stress hormones. And that was the first time I thought, well, I've been freezing cold for the last 3 years taking this thyroid medication. I don't have energy. I'm constantly tired. My digestion has gone from being bad to being terrible the last few years. So everything just got slower and slower, more sluggish, and my thyroid wasn't really getting better, and I've just got colder and colder. And I present as being thin, probably a little bit underweight, but I can't eat anything because I'm just constantly bloated and I have no energy. So reading Ray's stuff was quite refreshing for me, saying, it's possible that you don't have an overactive thyroid. He's saying the majority of cases are actually underactive, but these stress hormones are covering up the one thing that they are testing, which is TSH, and that's giving you a false indication of this possible overactive thyroid. So that was how I got back to Ray last year. Started reading more and more of his stuff. So just to show you, this is raypeat.com/articles. So Ray has a PhD in biology. I think he studied literature first, and then he's written a few books, mainly on women's health and hormones. I think Ray's, for me, one of the best resources that I have access to and everyone has access to is free information on the internet. Ray does podcasts to this day, so I think there's a couple people that ask if he will be on their show, and I think he does a few a month. So as I mentioned, 85 years old, but he's still presenting information each week, a couple times a month. And the thing that I want to pull out for this, for the myasthenia people, is if you read Ray Peat's stuff, read about unsaturated oils, so polyunsaturated fats, not just about, if you're not convinced about what Ray's saying about omega-3 and oxidizing before you even open the bottle, etc. If you just understand or read about what he's talking about in terms of vegetable oils, it really lines up with the last two sources that I spoke about. So the article and the book on myasthenia, saying that unsaturated fats disturb or waste your vitamin E. So you've got no vitamin E, which is disturbing your, what did they say? It oxidizes your fats. Well, stops your fats from being oxidized. So you've got no vitamin E to protect your vitamin A from being oxidized, and to protect these vegetable oils that you're still getting in from being oxidized. So they're highly unstable, cause a lot of oxidative and I think free radical damage in your system. So I think if you can just understand what Ray is saying about that and take that to heart, and I think the single thing for me that makes the difference, the biggest difference, if I can guess, and what carries the largest percentage, is removing vegetable oil from my diet. So when I started eating well, and everyone does, pretty much doesn't matter if you go vegan or you go carnivore or you go keto or you go low carb, a lot of these diets, and I think the thing that overlaps that has in common is processed food is one of the first things that come off. So I think it's one of the reasons why everybody sees success in some diets or almost any diet to a point, is because processed food is being removed. So if you're not eating these vegetable oils, a lot of the damage is stopping. Why I don't think people see full recovery is you maybe haven't found the right diet. So yes, you'll see some improvement by eating well, but you think that that's all that's possible. So you stop there, you say, well, this diet did some good, but it ends there. Where for me, it was a constant refining of, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, and I'm saying over a long period of time. So 4 years for me to get from diagnosis to now, and as I mentioned, I'm not in perfect health. You can ask folks in the chat, you can ask other people. I'm not claiming to be in perfect health. I'm struggling a lot with digestion and thyroid issues still, but I have seen trajectory over the last 4 years improving. So it's easier to tell if you have symptoms and if they're not covered by medication, because then you know if you are improving, something is working. The thing about if you have medication and you're doing something on the side, it's difficult to know, was it a change in medication that improved you, or was what you're eating? Or if you get worse, for example, did you react to a medication or did you react to some food? So for me, I know over a long period of time, I kept tweaking little things, but the major thing for me was since the beginning of starting to eat well, was cutting these unsaturated fats. As I mentioned, unfortunately, I didn't stop the omega-3 because everything I was reading saying omega-3 was so important, and I was taking fish oil supplements, and now I wish that I hadn't taken those fish oil supplements, because as I mentioned, that was probably oxidized before I even opened the bottle. So it's something that I wish I didn't do. But yeah, so I don't know if anyone has any questions. Ray stuff I can talk about forever. I'll probably talk more about certain things. But one thing that I didn't talk about, I'll talk about it in terms of Ray, but it also links to the other two. This is an article by Ray called Gelatin, Stress and Longevity. So in the article and the book, gelatin protein comes up quite a lot and is important for myasthenia. Why that is, you can read about it. Basically, to balance out methionine in the diet, we've moved away from eating the full animal, and we've gone towards eating more muscle meats, so more meats rich in methionine and cysteine. And we're not eating as much connective tissue, as much skin, for example, pork ears or cheek or skin, bones. So we're not getting as much cartilage, as much collagen and gelatin in our diet. So this is Ray's article about gelatin and stress and longevity. Yeah, I think fascinating. He talks about those amino acids I just spoke about, so cysteine, tryptophan are released during stress. And it's one of the reasons why Ray is not... all of his sort of common theme is lowering stress. So he talks about hypothyroidism or underactive thyroid being catabolic by nature. So you're not getting enough glucose into your system. So your body is breaking down muscle tissue to turn into glucose to feed your body. So when you're breaking down that tissue, saying you're breaking down muscle, you like I just mentioned, breaking down methionine, cysteine, tryptophan, which are just perpetuating that stress cycle. So they're driving more stress, which drives more catabolism, drives more breakdown of these proteins. And he speaks about that along with vegetable oil in the tissue or unsaturated fats. So when you're driving this stress system, you're breaking down these same tissues. So you're breaking down fats that contain unsaturated fats, which just further drive this stress system. So for me, the period I saw a lot of improvement was actually when I was eating a lot, before my digestion caved in, and just got slower and slower. Now I struggle to eat a lot at any given time. It's not very comfortable. But at that stage, I think the more you're eating, you are then, if you're putting on weight, I know some people don't want to put on weight, but the nature of putting on weight or being anabolic means that you're not catabolic by definition, and then you're not breaking down these tissues. So I think I was almost stopping that inflammation or stopping that stress reaction by putting on weight instead of breaking down tissue and being catabolic. So why I wanted to talk about this article in particular was because if you search Peat and Myasthenia Gravis, this will be the time it comes up. So Ray is not an expert on myasthenia. This is not like he's trying to treat myasthenia, but it was just interesting for me. He mentions here at the bottom, he says, in some older studies, therapeutic results improved when daily gelatin was increased. Since 30 grams of glycine was commonly used for treating muscular dystrophy and myasthenia gravis, a daily intake of 100 grams of gelatin wouldn't seem unreasonable. It would help people find, and some people find that quantities in that range might help to decrease fatigue. So, yeah, that was interesting for me. Once again, just understanding Ray's general philosophy, talking about gelatin, talking about all these anti-stress foods, and how those then linked by chance to what was the previous two things I spoke about, which are specifically aimed at myasthenia gravis. So the big things I take from the article and from the book are they're talking about nutrients, really, B vitamins, vitamin A, vitamin E, helping with the unsaturated fats that we've struggled to avoid in our diets. And then I didn't mention, but I just brought it in now, the gelatin and the glycine being important in myasthenia gravis. Now, if you read Ray's stuff, I'm not saying that those are the most important things that he talks about, but some of the most important things that he talks about holistically are vitamin E, or stopping unsaturated fats, and then vitamin E possibly to protect you from those in the interim if you can find a decent enough supplement. And then he talks a lot about glycine or gelatin or bone broth being what he uses as his main protein as an adult. He said kids do need some of the other amino acids to grow, but once you're an adult, he said you have less of a need for certain amino acids that you're not growing anymore, and that glycine can make up, or gelatin, or can make up the predominant amount of the protein in your diet. So I just thought that was fascinating how Ray's stuff really fitted into recovering from myasthenia without him publishing information on myasthenia specifically. So that for me was why I wanted to talk about Ray and his stuff as well. It's some of the stuff I read a lot more now because his stuff centers around thyroid, centers around Ray's stuff centers around thyroid, centers around increasing your metabolism, increasing your energy, lowering your stress. So it's all broad topics, and it's now that I don't need to speak about it. I'm just trying to pass on what Ray is saying. And for me, that's what I'm hoping long term is really going to continue to bring me relief from symptoms. I think a lot of people, just an example, struggle with heat with myasthenia gravis, and in the beginning I struggled terribly with heat. I remember if I had a braai or barbecue, if I was close to the flames, my eye would completely shut, the side of my face would shut down, my eye would water, I was tickets. So the heat really does exacerbate symptoms, but I almost wonder if it's not just because you're so stressed at that stage. Now, as I've mentioned, I almost seek out heat to try and improve my metabolism, improve my rate of energy. But I think I've been able to lower a lot of my stress and stress hormones. And as a result, I think that's then more natural that as your stress hormones come down, you start to feel the cold a bit more because you're not running on adrenaline, you're not running on cortisol, you can be a bit more relaxed, you can switch off when you need to. And I'm not saying that stuff's perfect for me, because not, but I need, I'm still improving on that. But I think Ray's philosophy as a whole is useful for me as someone with thyroid issues or coming from a history with myasthenia issues, and just going forward and trying to be optimally healthy. I think, Ray, some of the stuff that I've really enjoyed and continue to read a lot. So that was it pretty much for me. Really wanted to talk about the article, then into the book, and then into Ray Peat. As I mentioned, all of those will be linked in, or they are, I think, already linked in the description box. So I read through the article if you want. If you want to ask me anything about it, like I said, I'm not here to say do X, Y, Z, and then you're going to be fine. It's more to say I was empowered by this information, and I think you can be empowered by this if you've looked for this video and you're searching for myasthenia and stuff and health. I think this stuff changed my life, and it can change yours as well. So the book, if you can get your hands on a copy of that book, that, like I mentioned, there's an online copy, I think, in the States through some of the universities. so you can read through that. It's not the easiest read, and then Peat stuff, once again, is not the easiest stuff to work through. But I do know one or two people that have looked at it, and I think are already starting to see results from it besides me. So if I can encourage you to keep learning, that's what's allowed me to improve. Toby, if you're still there, if you have anything, I know you probably, if there's anyone else with myasthenia and you want to ask anything in particular about the resources in regard to myasthenia, if you could post that up in the chat so we can have a bit of a discussion now for a bit if anyone does want to ask anything. Otherwise, if anyone does want to ask anything from a general health perspective with regard to Ray, if you want to chat about that. I see there's a couple of comments representing Ray there, so if anyone does want to ask something, this would be a good time to do that. So yeah, for those that are tuned in, that unsubscribed, if you would like to see more of my content, you can subscribe to my channel. If you click the bell notification icon, you'll get identified when I go live. Then you can follow in with these. You can also see if I upload other videos. You can check my account if you are looking for some more information on my story. If there was anything else with regard to that. Yeah, I'll probably be hosting someone else next week again, just to let them tell their story with myasthenia, and just keep driving the awareness in that regard. So yeah, any questions there, guys? So just going to give a summary. If you did miss it, I'll put some show notes in the comments. So if you do tune on now and you want to go back once it's loaded up, you can check out the article. So the article that I have referenced, is called Myasthenia Gravis, a Holistic Approach by Walter Last. As I said, it wasn't rocket science info for me. It was a really good starting place. It gives you the introduction of myasthenia from the acetylcholine and antibody perspective. It then starts to talk about the causes and then nutritional factors. And as I mentioned, the nutritional factors really just opened my eyes to maybe there's certain nutrients, vitamins or minerals that are lacking in my diet, which caused me to get myasthenia. So that was the start of that for me. It mentioned, referencing the book, certain experiments that were done in animals that if they were missing certain nutrients, then they developed myasthenia. So that sort of intrigued me and started my sort of journey on really trying to focus on getting in good nutrition. Walter Last does then speak a bit about the thymus gland and myasthenia and manganese. That's in reference to the book. And then he gives a little indication of what he recommends is a good diet, and which I didn't follow exactly, to be honest. He recommends a lot of raw stuff. I did more cooked foods based on digestion and things like that. And I was looking for minerals, so I didn't do too much of a raw food. And then he does his supplement recommendation and alternate therapies. The book, as I mentioned, called The Thymus, Myasthenia Gravis and Manganese, incorporating another book called Myasthenia Gravis, Manganese and the Thymus by Emmanuel Josephson. So yeah, for me that book's online. You can find an online copy of that, because I think the second hand it's $65 or something on Amazon. But if you get original copy, I think it's over $1,000. So it is pretty expensive. And that book, once again, just reiterated for me, polyunsaturated fats more in the diet. They were saying in 1950 that unsaturated fat is a problem. We're sitting now in 2020 almost, still having all of these unsaturated fats in our diet. All processed foods, all takeaway foods sitting with unsaturated fats. I was consuming what I thought was a healthy diet, but obviously included quite a bit, if not a ridiculous amount of unsaturated fats or vegetable oils in my diet. So started to avoid that. And that book really encouraged me. Like I said, animal studies not proving anything, but the mere fact that they could show or develop myasthenia symptoms by withholding certain nutrients led me to think, okay, something's going on here. I need to investigate that or try certain things for myself. And then the last resource that I did speak about, one that is almost an ongoing resource, is Ray Peat. So Ray Peat, being a biologist, PhD in biology, written a few books on women's health and mainly hormones and things like that, which I think is really relevant, especially with autoimmune diseases affecting women 7 to 10 times more than men. And then Ray, in his articles, also spoke a lot about vegetable oils, a lot about vitamin E protecting you from those, and then speaks about cell energy, mitochondria energy, thyroid issues, and just the whole philosophy of stress and stress metabolism, which I find very interesting. As I mentioned, the book and the articles from Ray are pretty complicated. I don't pretend to understand everything or half the things that are going on in there, but I still think there's enough information there for me to realize that I can make some changes and I can improve from that. So Toby's got a practical question here. He says, for people who don't know where to start in avoiding polyunsaturated fats in the diet, what advice would you give them to start? So, very good question, and I'm just going to talk about personal experience. In the beginning, when I was trying to avoid processed foods or vegetable oils, I probably was so overboard. I tried to avoid everything. So I went like organic. I was going, I was super scared of getting any sugar. I was scared of getting gluten. I was just scared, which I don't think is a good space to be in. But now I realize that obviously I was so strict in the beginning that I didn't have any vegetable oil. I didn't go and eat out because I didn't trust that even what people were saying my food was cooked in was really cooked in that. So I avoided eating out. I avoided a lot of things in the beginning. And maybe if you do the right things, you don't need to be as strict as I was. But avoiding polyunsaturated fats, I think the main thing is food that's not prepared yourself. That's where they're going to be hiding, or not even hiding. That's where they're going to be. Sometimes hidden that you don't know, but most of the time right there. So takeaway food, anything that's fried or cooked anywhere, probably not at your house, and maybe even including at your house, is probably cooked in vegetable oil. Vegetable oil is unsaturated fat, whether it's canola, sunflower, soybean, or sometimes there's fish cooking oil. So that's pretty much the stuff that the article book Ray recommends to avoid, and that's the stuff that I've been avoiding, is bad fats or bad oils. So restaurant eating and takeaway eating. So whether you're having a pastry, deep fried chips, chicken wings, burgers, pretty much doesn't matter. I mean, everything to even a chocolate bar has, if you look at the ingredients, you'll see vegetable in that. Obviously, the biggest thing will come from being cooked in those oils. So, I mean, a chocolate bar can only have so much vegetable oil in, but if you eat deep fried chips, obviously you're getting a whole lot of vegetable oil. I avoid all of it. But if you want to look at what is the biggest contributor to your diet, it's going to be takeaway foods and processed foods from the frozen section. Those are probably all made with unsaturated oils. So that was for me. So when I cooked at home, or when I cook at home, I'm using coconut oil or buying meat that is grass-fed, so ruminant meat is a lot of that is saturated fat. And this links into the next question here. Ian asks, so Toby, if that's pretty much what you're asking, you can just give me a thumbs up there. Hopefully that answers that. And then leads into Ian's question, what's your take on eating chicken and pork, and what type of fish should somebody eat? So you can also look for this on the internet as well. The poultry consumption in the last 100 years seems to have changed quite drastically as well. I'm assuming poultry is cheaper to farm than other animals. And poultry now, along with other animals, is fed a lot of these unsaturated, or foods that contain these unsaturated fats. So corn, soybean, if that's being fed to these animals, ruminant animals, so lamb, cows, or I'm not sure if you can put wild animals in that, but are converting grass and feed into mostly saturated fats, where pork and chicken contain a lot more polyunsaturated fats, just the nature of the animal. And on top of that, the diet richer in more corn and soy tends to make the fat in pork and chicken higher in polyunsaturated fat. So that's actually a mistake that actually Ian has reminded me of there. That's a mistake that I also made for a couple of years before really reading Ray's stuff again last year. I was eating quite a bit of chicken, and when I was eating chicken, I was consuming, if we roasted a whole chicken or pieces or something like that, I would consume, we'd make gravy or something out of the fat from roasting the chicken. And obviously a lot of that, or most of that, is unsaturated fat. And it was actually quite interesting when I used to make bone broth as well. We make it with chicken feet. A lot of good gelatin and glycine in that, but I was consuming the fat as well. And that was actually, my mouth got pretty numb. I don't know if it was the heat of the food or if it was the polyunsaturated fats. But the chicken broth or soup that I made from that used to actually make my symptoms pretty bad at that stage. So that was quite interesting. Now I eat a lot less chicken, and when I do, I don't overly consume the fat. So I eat more lean chicken, or if I do roasted chicken, I won't eat the juice. We'll separate the fat and then just eat the chicken. It's actually what Ray recommends if you're going to eat pork as well. He says he double fries his bacon. So you'll fry the bacon, then refry it in saturated fats, coconut oil or something like that, to try and protect himself from the polyunsaturated fat in that pork. And then to finish off Ian's question, what type of fish should someone eat? Cold water fish are high, once again, in unsaturated fats. So what do I eat now? I don't have a lot of fish. I eat a lot more, well, not a lot, but I've eaten more seafood of late than before. So I try to eat shellfish, so sort of low-fat fish, and then warm water fish, and leaner white fish. So sole is one that I have quite a bit, or when I have fish, obviously. I have a bit of sole, so then there's also, once again, less polyunsaturated fat in that. So yeah, that's for me. The big thing for me, I think, is lowering those bad fats. As I mentioned before, it takes a long time. I started seeing improvements fairly, quickly, because I was obviously in quite a bad state, and I didn't medicate too heavily in the beginning, or ever. So naturally, as I started seeing improvements, it was quite evident to see. For example, if you're struggling chewing, and then you stop struggling chewing, it's quite a distinct difference. As I improve more and more, it gets a bit more difficult to see. Am I stronger now than I was yesterday? It's harder to see because I don't have obvious myasthenia symptoms. But I think the big thing for me was those fats just take such a long time, and the stress and stuff that we have in our body, as I mentioned, just perpetuates these breakdown of these fats and keeps liberating them into the bloodstream, which continues to drive the stress reaction. So the thing that I've tried to do based off Ray's stuff is to break that stress reaction and then try and implement things into my diet and lifestyle, which overall is lowering stress and stopping consuming these foods which are driving this perpetuated stress reaction in my body. Which I think is quite interesting because, yeah, I wanted to share information, but I've never come out and said I eat in such and such a way. I don't know if anyone actually knows exactly how I eat. But yeah, for me and it probably comes a bit from Ray's influence. There's a lot of people that follow sort of Ray Peat diets, but it's their opinion of what Ray Peat suggests, or putting all of his information together to come up with a diet that they think represents Ray. Something like Ray Peat has released a diet on his website saying this is what everyone should eat. And I think that's what I've tried to relay tonight as well. It's not about a specific way of eating. It's more about learning, adapting, seeing what works, and to keep improving. And obviously mindset carries quite a lot behind that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm positive every day, but I sort of have an underlying desire to be completely healthy, and I believe that I can be completely healthy. So, and I understand if that's offensive to some people. I understand that you've been told that myasthenia is for life, and you must accept that. I chose to not accept that, and I don't accept it. So, but I understand it's a sensitive topic. I understand that people might think some people can improve, other people can't. But I think if you're willing to learn and absorb information, you can keep improving. And yeah, that's also one of the reasons why I want to show my journey through these videos is I don't think, like I said, I'm sitting here saying I've got digestion issues, my thyroid is really low, my body temperature is shocking. I'm not doing well, but I'm still doing a hell of a lot better than I was doing 4 years ago. So if I can keep showing that, next year we can say, okay, cool, I'm still doing better. The following year, even better. And on the flip side of that, say I don't do well, then, for example, we can say, well, there's something that you did that didn't work. So, what is that? And either way, I think people will be able to learn from that. So, yeah, I quite enjoyed that, guys. I appreciate everybody tuned in. I appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. This is something that I wanted to talk about for a while. Yeah, I might talk more about these further. If anyone does have any questions, if you watch this in the repeat and you do think some of the information is a bit confusing, or you want further clarification on what I think about something, I'd love to engage. One of the points of my channel is just to engage with everybody with myasthenia, to try and break this sort of lack of hope that sometimes exists because people think that we are stuck. And I'm not speaking from being here and everyone is somewhere else. I'm trying to speak on a level with everyone. I struggled a lot, especially with myasthenia stuff in the beginning. Like I said, I took time off work. I understand it's difficult. So the reason why I'm making these videos is because I saw some improvements from implementing certain things, and I just want to share what I've used. So if somebody can take that and improve, it's not my information, it's not my books, the stuff's there on the internet, and I think it is useful information that can help people. So yeah, if you do have myasthenia and you find any of the stuff useful, if you'd like to share this video with somebody else, and hopefully that information can inspire them to move forward in their health as well. I think I'm going to call it there for tonight, guys. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Thanks for the guys in the chat doing the comments. Thanks for moderating, Ian, and thanks for asking the questions, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll see you soon. If you haven't already, You can pop the video a like, please, and then share it with somebody if you think that it would be useful for them. Well, guys, all the best for the week ahead. We'll catch you soon. Cheers.